Bienvenidos, vuestros mercedes, damas y caballeros, soldados. Welcome back to another video on the Ancient Roman Patrician Gentes. I am your host, Spanish Galleon, and today we will go over the family tree of the Gens Aemilii or Aemilia. This Gens is one of the most illustrious of the ancient Roman world. Out of about 20 or so families that ran the affairs of Rome, the Gens Aemilia are part of an elite 6 or so families that were at least around since the founding of the city. Being part of the, quote, Gentes Maiores, unquote, an endonym rather than a concrete distinction so far as the sources relate. They held numerous offices, consulships, and years of service that rival regal dynasties of human history. Another benefit is that they have lasted for a long time across many branches, making them appear in a variety of ancient sources and endure from the founding of the city to the beginnings of the empire and the start of the Christian era. But before we dive in, thank you for watching and for your support. Don't forget to like the video, comment on your favorite member, and subscribe for more ancient Roman Patrician content. Now, let's dive into the Gentes. Let me lay some ground rules for the video. First, I will discuss the Patrician branches of the Gens, so no plebeian branches. Second, I will discuss the branches during the regal and republican eras of Rome, but I will briefly name imperial and Christian era members. 3. I will only rely on ancient sources when discussing each family member. If there are no ancient sources on an individuals, then I leave it to my discretion to speculate on them. 4. I will briefly describe what occurred during their time in office, as this video is already quite long. 5. For the sake of brevity and sanity, all members will be referred to as Aemilius, and not by their individual first name. 6. I will try to pronounce names as faithfully as possible and refer to each date by the Roman convention with the Gregorian convention in parentheses. I've also compiled a list of ancient sources, and their respective links are in a separate document that I will attempt to publish elsewhere. Finally, I will break up these videos into multiple parts and supercut them once it's finished. Thank you for understanding. Let's begin with the so-called founding of the family, the Aemilii Mamerci et Mamercini Branch. The ancestor of the Aemilia might have been someone bearing the name of Mamercus. According to Plutarch, Mamercus was either the son of Pythagoras, educator of King Numa Pompilius, receiving the name Aemilius for the grace and charm of his discourse, or Mamercus was the son of King Numa, named Mamercus after the son of Pythagoras, and Aemilius was an endearing name the king called him after the grace and winsomeness of his speech. Plutarch also writes that some authors disagree whether Numa had sons. He states that Numa had 4 sons, and Mamercus, being one, founded an honorable family, the Mamerci, and possibly had the surname Reges, or kings. Lewy writes that Pythagoras and Numa lived in different times, and therefore could not have met each other. A similar name, Amulius, is given to us by Silius Italicus, writing about Lucius Aemilius Paulus, died at Cannae in 216 BC, and claims descent from Assaracus, and from Assaracus to Jupiter. A quick search of the family tree, according to Wikipedia, source of all truth, is shown here. And that's as much information available on the semi-legendary founder of the Aemilia Gens. Whether or not he existed is up for debate, but I do believe he existed in some way, just not concrete. Even amongst the ancients, there was debate. But all things have a beginning, so too with the Gens Aemilia. Lucius Aemilius Mamercus. This man was consul for the years 270 AUC, 484 BC, 276 AUC, 478 BC, and 281 AUC, 473 BC. During his first consulship, Aemilius led an army against the Aequi and Volscians, and was superbly successful according to Louis. Dionysius tells a more detailed account, stating that Aemilius casted the lot to face the enemy, initially engaged in battle and lost, retreated to a strong position, and waited as the Volscians attacked his army. Holding out and receiving reinforcements, he was able to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, albeit at great cost. Nonetheless, he didn't oversee the elections, and that was his first consulship. During his second consulship, Aemilius brought up the Roman legions to Tuscany, and he engaged in battle with the Veientines, and were defeated in battle. Louis writes, Dionysius writes that the Volscians and Aequians, along with the Tyrrhenians and Veientines, all attacked Rome. Aemilius was tasked to defeat the Tyrrhenians, but arrived and found the Veientines disorganized, and sparing no time, attacked and defeated them. After the battle, an agreeable peace treaty was ratified, and the Honorable Aemilius asked the Senate for a triumph. The Senate denied his request, citing the weak peace treaty he concluded, and in turn, Aemilius did what he could to sabotage the Senate. Interesting note is that Diodorus Siculus mentions Aemilius, but that he served with a different named consul and at war with different named enemies. During his third consulship, Louis tells us, was one where internal strife dominated the year. A trial of former consuls divided the city into two, and so great a fanfare was met with such underwhelming conclusions. On the day of the trial, the tribune who called it was found dead, and nothing of note occurred. A different story, Dionysius writes, as Aemilius had no external threat, rather an internal one. A tribune wanted to distribute public lands, but was blocked by the Senate and the consuls. Desperate, he sued the former consuls to try and get the land distributed. However, on the day before the trial, the tribune was dead, and no malicious cause was found. Another event occurred involving Aemilius. The consuls stripped a veteran of his rank without justification. The man fought back, and soon a quarrel broke out, with the plebeians backing the veteran and the consuls and senate together. So divisive was this stalemate, no military campaigns were done. Tiberius Aemilius Mamercus. This man was consul for the years 284 AUC, 470 BC, and 287 AUC, 467 BC. During his first consulship, according to Louis, there were contentions over the agrarian law and the long trial of Appius Claudius, a patrician who stubbornly railed against the plebeians' concerns with the law. So stubborn was his attitude, a trial was brought before Appius Claudius, but he died before completion. In the same year, Aemilius led an army against the Sabines, laid waste their lands, fought them in battle, and ended in a draw. Satisfied, he left, and that was his year as consul. Dionysius of Halicarnassus writes a more detailed account of Aemilius' year as consul. The aforementioned grievances of the plebs with regards to distribution of the land gained through conquest were taken sincerely by Aemilius, partly due to the Senate's denial of a triumph to his father Lucius. A meeting was called, and Lucius spoke about justice and practicality for the division of land. After his impassioned speech, exhorting the Senate to act, but the next man to speak was Appius Claudius. After a whole speech expressing the contrary opinion, Claudius got the ire of the plebs, went to trial, and died. Tiberius then led the army against the Sabines, laid waste their lands, and fought them, ended in a draw, and left. During his second consulship, Louis writes that just as before Aemilius advocated for the distribution of land, the Senate wasn't happy at the prospect of giving up the land they acquired, and only through Aemilius' co-consul Fabius they brokered a truce by allowing newly acquired lands near Antium to be offered up to everyone. This did return harmony to the state, although the plebs preferred lands near Rome. Dionysius of Halicarnassus recounts similar events as Livy. The tribunes, being motivated by Aemilius' support, called for land distribution. The Senate this time proposed to divvy up land near the Aniates, Antinum, but to little fanfare from the plebs. Aemilius is also said to have led an army against the Sabines, but after not encountering an army, laid waste their lands and returned home to facilitate the elections for next year. Gaius Aemilius Mamercus. Not much is said about this member except for one source. Neither Livy nor Dionysius nor Diodorus mention him. The only source comes from Lidus, and it's uncertain if it's a member of the Aemilia or not. No more will be said about this individual. Mamercus Aemilius Mamercinus. This man was consul for the year 316 AUC, 438 BC. He also held the quaestorship and the dictatorship 3 times, 308 AUC, 446 BC, and 317 AUC, 437 BC, 320 AUC, 434 BC, 328 AUC, 426 BC. According to Tacitus, this member was among the first elected quaestors in the city, 63 years after the expulsion of the Tarquins. He next appears as one of the military tribunes with consular powers, according to Livy, and there was a revolt and he helped to facilitate the elections. The following year, Aemilius became dictator, and in general went out and fought the Fidenii, Falscians, and the Veientines, who were revolting, and won. Returning home, Aemilius was awarded a triumph before carrying out the rest of the office. To add confusion, he is called different names, but I will keep it as Mamercus Aemilius Mamercinus as a distinguishing feature. During another crisis, Aemilius was chosen as dictator once more, as the Fidenii, Veientines, and Falscians seemed poised to attack. Livy writes that unfortunately nothing came about. Nevertheless, Aemilius took action with this opportunity and he abridged the censorship powers. He convened the people to relate his decision and afterwards gave up command and left a hero to the plebs and an enemy of the censors. The censors then exiled him, took his property, and increased his tax burden. This Aemilius took the punishment nobly, and everyone was shocked at this. Next, Aemilius is appointed to a special commission to investigate trouble in the lands of the Fidenates and found nothing. He shows up again a couple of years later as dictator, 3rd time, and his 16-day dictatorship is related to us by Livy. After declaring war on the revolting, the 7th time, Fidenates, along with Veii, the consuls, 4 at the time, rode out and lost to the enemy. The city entered a panic and Aemilius was selected as dictator. He roused up the army and city and rode out. After setting up the battle, he charged the enemy, who frightened the Romans with torches. As the Romans tried to break, the dictator exhorted the men, causing them to fight fire with fire. He then gave a signal, and his master of the horse, his second in command, led a cavalry charge, with torches attached to the horses' heads, into the enemies. This caused the enemies to rout, and the battle was won. Aemilius and company then plundered the camp and city, and returned to Rome victorious, possibly receiving a triumph. Then he and his master of the horse resigned. Only Diodorus and Orosius confirmed this battle, along with a plethora of anecdotes of others. Diodorus calls Aemilius Anius and not Mamercus. Manius Aemilius Mamercinus. This man was consul for the year 344 AUC, 410 BC, and consular tribune for the years 349 AUC, 405 BC, 351 AUC, 403 BC, and 353 AUC, 401 BC. During his first consulship, this member witnessed an enemy army attack and occupy a local citadel, but his co-consul Valerius was prevented from levying an army due to a tribune. The army was able to retake the citadel and the plunder. Note, Louis calls him Manlius, and Diodorus calls him Gaius Manius, so I will assume him to be Manius. During his first consular tribuneship, he and the other tribunes laid siege to Veii. Note, Louis calls him Mamercus, but assuming that Livy calls all these members after their founder, Mamercus. During his second consular tribuneship, Louis writes that 8 tribunes were elected, and that during this time the war with Veii continued. During his third consular tribuneship, unlike previous terms, Rome was beset with problems at home and abroad. In a nutshell, Rome suffered from multiple poorly managed wars, an overtaxed populace that had been deprived of fathers and sons, and to even pay a tax after the war would conclude on land that hadn't been used in years. There were also issues from the tribune of the plebs and the agrarian law, but for brevity I skipped it. Aemilius is mentioned as going off to face Veii with Caeso Fabius, his co-tribune. Regardless, the aforementioned tax burden prevented any victory as soldiers clamored for pay, while plebeian tribunes held up the Senate at home. Thus ends his term. Gaius Aemilius Mamercinus. This man was consular tribune for the years 360 AUC, 394 BC, and 363 AUC, 391 BC. During his first consular tribuneship, he led an army against the Aequi with Spurius Postumius. After routing the enemy, Aemilius held Verugo, while his partner devastated the land. His co-tribune was defeated once, reproached his men, and was attacked by the Aequi near Verugo at night. Aemilius' men heard the battle, and some fled towards Rome, even after Aemilius called them to remain. Regardless, the motivated Romans annihilated the Aequian army. During his second consular tribuneship, he and possibly his brother served during the same year, but this Aemilius went on campaign against the Volscians. He was able to achieve a victory against the enemy, and the Romans negotiated a peace. Lucius Aemilius Mamercinus. This man was consular tribune 6 times, for the years 363 AUC, 391 BC, 365 AUC, 389 BC, 367 AUC, 387 BC, 371 AUC, 383 BC, 372 AUC, 382 BC, and 374 AUC, 380 BC. During his first consular tribuneship, not much is to be said other than he served his term with possibly his brother Gaius. Note, Louis names him as M, presumably Mamercus. During his second consular tribuneship, Rome had just been sacked and defeated the Gauls when Aemilius was elected as consular tribune and now helped to rebuild the city. The enemies of Rome, however, attacked the downed Rome, so a dictator was selected and they sent Aemilius to defend against the Etruscans. During his third consular tribuneship, nothing of note apart from the rebuilding of Rome, a dedication of the temple of Mars, and the integration of new citizens into the tribes of Rome. Note, Louis writes that this was his second time, while Diodorus doesn't name him. During his fourth consular tribuneship, Rome was embroiled in wars with neighboring towns and facing pestilence. The army was unable to sally out due to disease, and a number of revolts broke out due to the Senate refusing terms with the towns. During his fifth consular tribuneship, immediately following last year, war was in the air, and Aemilius was left to defend the city as 2 of his colleagues sallied out and faced the enemies and defeated them. During his sixth consular tribuneship, Aemilius seems to be one of 8 consular tribunes, but did nothing. according to the ancient sources apart from mention. The plebeian tribunes, in conflict with the Senate, and a war with the Praenestes and other Latin tribes as well. Note, Louis doesn't mention Aemilius. Lucius Aemilius Mamercinus. This man was consul for the years 388 AUC, 366 BC, and 391 AUC, 363 BC, and was consular tribune for the year 377 AUC, 377 BC. Nice. He also served as master of the horse twice and interrex once. 386 AUC, 368 BC, 402 AUC, 352 BC, and 399 AUC, 355 BC, respectively. During his consular tribuneship, Aemilius and his fellow tribunes were able to field 3 armies during difficult times, and Aemilius with Valerius led one army to Satricum. Arriving, they fought the Latins and Volscians in a pitched battle, until the weather interrupted them. The next day, the battle continued, and wasn't going well for the Romans, until a cavalry and infantry charge won the day. The Latins and Volscians fled, and the Romans cut them down and plundered their camp. The following day, the remainder of the enemies fled to Antium, with the Romans on their heels, but they were able to reach the city, whereupon the Romans laid siege. According to Diodorus, there was civil strife between choosing consuls and military tribunes. The latter was chosen, and Aemilius was chosen as one of 6. The next office Aemilius held was that of the master of the horse. According to Louis, during a distressing time, the plebeians were clamoring for the chance to elect one of their own to the consulship. After failing to find a political solution, the patricians elected Marcus Furius Camillus as dictator and Aemilius as master of the horse. In this capacity, Furius tried to strong-arm the opposition, but failed and resigned. Thus ends Aemilius' episode here. During his first consulship, the dispute between the plebeians and patricians were largely resolved, and Aemilius was elected consul after years of consular tribunes. General anxieties over the Gauls in Apulia, and at home the newly created offices of praetor and aedile, hammering out their functions. Note: Aemilius is called Mamercus by both Louis and Diodorus. During his second consulship, there was a terrible pestilence entering its 3rd year. So devastating was the disease that rumors emerged that only a nail driven by a dictator can please the gods. Therefore, a dictator was elected, a religious ceremony performed, and the year came to an end. Years later, Aemilius served as an interrex after a plebeian dictator had vanquished an enemy army, and the Senate would not accept the results of the elections conducted by said dictator. His final office was as master of the horse. He served Gaius Iulius, dictator, to respond to false threats from a recent Etrurian uprising. The dictator tried to call for elections, but failed, and soon resigned. Lucius Aemilius Mamercinus Privernas. This man was consul for the years 413 AUC, 341 BC, and 425 AUC, 329 BC, and held the offices of Master of the Horse, Dictator, Interrex, and Dictator for the years 412 AUC, 342 BC, 419 AUC, 335 BC, 428 AUC, 326 BC, and 438 AUC, 316 BC, respectively. During his time as Master of the Horse, a mutinous Roman army was marching on Rome, when the Senate elected a dictator, Marcus Valerius Corvus, and he selected Lucius Aemilius Mamercus as his Master of the Horse, according to Louis. The dictator met the mutineers and came to an agreement, passing laws and restoring concord for everyone. Hence, his dictatorship ended in peace. Note, Louis uses Mamercus for the name, but Mamercinus will be used to reference this member. During his first consulship, while under attack, 2 armies were sent out and Aemilius led an army against the Samnites. He entered Sabellian territory, found no enemies, and proceeded to lay waste to the area. Envoys from the Samnites were sent, and they asked for peace terms and offered to declare war with another tribe, the Sidicines. The terms were presented to the Senate by Tiberius Aemilius, and they accepted the terms. Aemilius stipulated a year's pay and 3 months' rations for the soldiers, as they withdrew and waited for the Samnite envoys. Nothing came from the formal talks, and Aemilius was forced to step down to allow the new consuls time to properly prepare for war. During his next office, Aemilius was selected as dictator, naming Quintus Publius Pillo as his master of the horse, and held elections as both consuls were waging war elsewhere. During his second consulship, Aemilius and his colleague Gaius Plautius were immediately ordered to the front between the Privernates and the Gauls. Aemilius gathered troops, not letting any man claim exemption, and headed to Veii to stop the Gauls. After a few days, and reports indicating the Gauls weren't a threat, Aemilius led the army to siege Privernum. Either the city was taken or surrendered before the final assault, but what is known is that Privernum was taken, its walls destroyed, and Aemilius was given a triumph. Afterwards, on deciding what to do with the rebellious people, either Aemilius or his colleague Plautius exhorted the Senate to be generous with terms and make them citizens. Note, in all likelihood, Plautius gave the speech, and since Aemilius celebrated a triumph, he probably earned the name Privernas to distinguish himself. During his office as interrex, Aemilius held elections as one consul was in Samnite territory and the other consul faced bad omens, and so couldn't properly nominate a dictator. So the 15th interrex was Aemilius, and the consuls for the next year were elected. During his final office as dictator, Aemilius was given control of the legions. He and his master of the horse, Marcus Fulvius, attacked the town of Satricula, which the Samnites at once renewed hostilities with the Romans. Having set up a strategic position, Aemilius commanded his men against both attackers and routed both of them, achieving victory before the year ended, and he passed on the dictatorship to another, Tiberius Aemilius Mamercinus. This man was consul for the year 415 AUC 339 BC, and held other offices of mensarii and praetor for the years 402 AUC 352 BC and 413 AUC 341 BC. His time is concurrent with another family member, Lucius Aemilius Mamercinus Privernas. See previous. For all intents and purposes, they are considered brothers. Louis mentions Aemilius as one of 5 bankers, or mensarii, to handle the financial obligations and debts of the Roman state in 402 AUC 352 BC. Whether this was a distinct member of the family or Louis is confounding another member is debated. For now, Aemilius is Tiberius Aemilius Mamercinus of 339 BC. During his praetorship, Aemilius proposed the demands of the Samnites to his brother, received before the Senate. For a brief understanding, see his brother's first time as consul. During his first consulship, Aemilius and his colleague Quintus Publius Pillo simply campaigned against various enemies of Rome. Pillo campaigned and won against the Latins, entitling him to a triumph. Aemilius led an army to Pedum, where a combined force of Tibur, Praeneste, Velitrae, and some forces from Lanuvium and Antium. Defeating the enemies in various battles, all that remained was the city and allied camp itself. Aemilius, upon hearing rumors of triumph in his colleague's honor, made haste for the city and asked the Senate for a triumph. The Senate rejected the notion, souring relations between Aemilius and the Senate. In turn, Aemilius turned to the plebeians, talking bad about the Senate, reminding them of the unfair allocation of lands, and selected his co-consul as dictator to fight against the Latins. His colleague then passed 3 new measures that limited the patricians and favored the plebeians. Note, Diodorus calls him Tiberius. Now let me display what I believe to be the correct possible version of the family tree. Let me also go over the combined accomplishments of the family. Over an active political period of 168 years, from 484 BC to 316 BC, the Mamerci et Mamercini held the consulship 11 times, the consular tribuneship 12 times, the office of dictator 5 times, the office of magister equitum, master of the horse, 3 times, other offices 5 times, and 2, possibly 3, triumphs. As to their divine origin, I hold the opinion that while possible, it is more likely that the founder, Mamercus, was just a nobleman during the era of kings, and so when the Republic was founded, he held a position near the reins of government. This is why it took 25 years until a member was elected consul, at least according to the ancient sources. Anything can happen in a quarter century. I mean, take a look at our current times. So it's likely that the consulship was off limits until the son, Lucius, passed enough time dedicating to the res publica that he was elected. Then again, who knows, as all we have is a fraction of the ancient sources that covered this time. Regardless of what could be, what is known, I have mentioned above, and I exhort you all to read through the sources themselves. That being said, I have been your host, Spanish Galleon, and thank you for watching this video. This is part 1 of the Gens Aemilia, and part 2 is in the works. Subscribe to receive updates, and be there when it drops. If you appreciate my work and are feeling generous, check out the channel links to send appreciation or monetary compensation. Gracias y Viva Cristo Rey. Arriba Hispanidad. Adelante Hispanos.